contacts on the sewer commission, so she, in case she doesn't recognize the scribbles.
Glasses.
I think Lola Name probably.
Yeah.
My glasses. Okay, this is the Thursday, November 19th, 2015 meeting of the Mashpee Sewer Commission. I'll call the meeting to order. We don't have October 8th minutes, so we're going to skip over that. Status of the DRI review. We went to a commission hearing last week, and at the request of Selectman Gottlieb related to doing a watershed-based permit for Papaneset Bay. The DRI hearing has been continued. It's been extended to May. What's the date here? May 20th, 2016. Not sure why we had to extend it because of the permit, but it's been extended, so we're not technically done with our DRI review process or with effect the plan, but Jeff has attended his last meeting under the contract, and we've got billing for that, and we'll just have to see what happens between now and then. The watershed permit is something that Jeff will be working on, and will be working on. I assume some of us will be involved with under the $80,000 article that was approved by town meeting. Meanwhile, we have the second letter that I gave you, which was addressed to Rodney Collins, which came out a little bit earlier, just indicating that phase one of the plan, at least, is in conformance with the 208 plan, and so that we can be comfortable going ahead with doing work on phase one as called for on the plan, which we will start doing. Oh, you can get that one? It's addressed to the Rodney Collins, but here you go. All right, so that being said, have you got anything further to say, Jeff, about the plan itself? As a matter of fact, Jeff, could you come up and just sit at the table here so you don't have to jump up and down to a mic? That's a live mic, so. Just sit over there. We'll leave Joe's seat open in case he shows up, but.
Glenn told me I'd be here. I said I'd wait to be invited.
You're always invited.
I know. Jeff Gregg from GHD. I guess the only thing I would add is that I think the reason that they asked to postpone the DRI hearing, or continue the DRI hearing until the 20th of May, is to give the town enough time to work with the commission and DEP on what the watershed permit could look like for Pompanesett Bay, because the indication I got from that meeting is that the commission wants to formulate their DRI response based on what comes out of the sort of the permit format, so that their requirements and the permit requirements kind of dovetail, and so they're not giving you something that's above or different than what's coming out and as part of the requirements of the permit. So I think they just basically wanted to give themselves more time to deal with that. I don't know, in terms of the actual date, I don't know why they picked that day over any other, but.
I don't either, but in other words, we're a guinea pig for a whole new world in terms of permitting on the Cape related to the discharge permit, the watershed discharge permit. So that moves us to where I said we're going, we can move ahead with phase one of the plan. I've given you one, I've given them a copy of the draft agreement that for the comparison of
Yep.
the three approaches to sharing responsibility in Papaneset Bay. That's something that Jeff has given to Andy to, under his $80,000 deal, as a first step, basically looking at the pilot project that was done, what has been done within the plan, and
The 208 plans.
208 plans version of the world, and to see, compare them, see whether or not how they're far off or whatever, and to come back with a couple options in terms of a starting point for discussions with Sandwich and Barnstable relative to Papaneset Bay responsibility on nitrogen reduction and nitrogen targets. That's a first step there. The first step with us, I don't know if you brought anything tonight, is developing a scope for the article that we had approved, the $100,000 article to develop feasibility and maybe some preliminary design for the collection systems that we would like to see attached to the Wampanoag Village and Mashpee Commons treatment plants. Just while it's getting handed out, I did have a conversation with Andy. Basically, this contract and our and the one we just talked about need to be coordinated. Obviously, the $80,000 article covers MOUs with private facilities, including Mashpee Commons and Wampanoag Village. So work on that has got to be sort of go hand in hand with this project, because unless we have an agreement or are heading towards agreement with these two plants, doing the collection system to those plants, is sort of pointless. So I've actually got a meeting with Andy tomorrow morning at 9 to discuss how these two are going to interact and how they'll be coordinated. But what I asked Jeff to do for us tonight is to give us a scope of services for the project that we got approved at town meeting. And I forgot my reading glasses, so I'm not going to be able to read this here. Why don't you just give us a summary?
Okay.
We'll take it back, this, and review it.
Yep.
I don't think we're going to act on anything tonight because this is an actual contract, but if you give us an idea of what you've got in here for scope.
Yep, and as Tom alluded to, obviously, if the scope is contingent on the town being able to, work out whatever they need to with regards to Wampanoag and Mashpee Commons.
Right, and we have had some conversations in the past, but certainly nothing to the level of a MOU or certainty, so.
So, this is a draft document. In the first half, Exhibit A is the proposed scope, and Exhibit B is a lot of standard language that we carry that talks about a lot of the other things that we don't do that the town may need to do or maybe need to provide as part of it. So just keeping in mind that I'm really going to focus on the first 4 pages, which is the scope of services. So there's a data review portion where we just need to gather all the most current information with regards to the upgrades at Mashpee Commons, the Wampanoag facility, their plans, design information, information about the 2 schools that you want to connect, so we have an idea of what their proposed, what their existing flows might be. Are they projected to grow? Those kinds of things. Some of that projection, so that as we start looking at sizing facilities, and things of that nature. Then it gets into the evaluation. So the next 2 tasks focus on the wastewater treatment capacity evaluation for the 2 existing facilities. So we look at their treatment processes, we look at the flows and loads that we would be sending to it, what they're seeing now, and assess, how much not only hydraulic capacity they have, but load capacity they have, because that plays into it as well.
I just had to pick up on this. It talks about rotating biological contractors.
It's contactors.
Yes, I know. Sorry to embarrass you.
No, it's all right. It's,
I'm just picturing these biological contractors rotating.
that's right. We have little people in there that they sit there and they spin a wheel.
I suppose we can consider the bacteria our contractors.
That's right. They're little mini contractors, just a lot of them.
How in the past, are you expecting, looking at upgrades, or are you just saying what they got right now?
It's both. So the idea is that you've got one facility, the Mashpee Commons, that they just upgraded. They've designed it for dealing with what they know they have, plus probably the projection of what they feel they want to deal with. And we want to look at that and see, you know, how much of that capacity is there, what their sort of their projection is of use, when it might be in the future. Can they accommodate? Do they have any extra flow in there? You know, do they have any extra capacity in there? Can we maximize the use of their system? Or do we need to look at other process upgrades? With the Wampanoag facility, I believe that are there many properties that are actually connected to it? When I first saw it, they
Zero.
had just built it, so I didn't think that
No,
anything was connected
they
to
haven't
it.
built anything yet, so the plant's just sitting there.
So on the flip side there.
And that's one where I don't see any expansion or anything like that. Mashpee Commons is a $108,000 gallon discharge permit today. Everything that we've seen over the years indicates that for their own project, they're going to need more than that ultimately, so that whether we do it or they do it, that plant's probably ultimately got to be expanded. But I guess we'd probably be looking at a short-term and a long-term, and be very deeply involved in conversations with them about the future of that plant. Whereas the Wampanoag plant, again, particularly since the land is in trust now and it's on a federal reservation, I can imagine that just given the governmental circumstances, that we may end up just being a customer, in effect, contracting for treatment services from that plant, which definitely has excess capacity. They need about 15,000. It's a 40,000 gallon RBC. So, whereas the Mashpee Commons plant, it's always been discussed with them that ultimately it makes sense that it become a municipal facility, and so it becomes part of that whole discussion under the other contract, based on some of the information that comes from this contract. What happens to that plant in the short term? You know, maybe we tie into what they've got, and in the long term it has to be expanded, and that's where we're talking about possibly making it a municipal facility.
Yeah, so on the flip side, you know, there's with the Wampanoag facility, it was designed to serve a certain purpose, but in the future, if it was used and it's taking flow, there may also be needs to make recommendations that as they build out their system, that may be needed to be upgraded to improve the performance. So it may not necessarily need to be upgraded for capacity, but it may need to be upgraded in the future for performance, again, depending on how well the shellfish and other things do up gradient and what that load impact is. And so we talked about that in the report. I touch on that later in the scope as well.
It's probably one that'll be harder to do than the other plants, though, because of the situation.
Understood, and because, you know,
because
they
how it
have,
was funded in the first place with the
so
funds.
it may be that you're a customer to some point, and then we have to consider, you know, what the offset is for those, or whether or not those would cease to be customers if the Wampanoag built out theirs, wanted that capacity back, weren't going to upgrade for a higher level of treatment or something like, I mean, it
Or we
could be,
may just have to assume that level of treatment with a certain number of customers and deal with the load
Correct.
elsewhere.
Exactly, so it's,
Probably the simplest thing to do.
certainly, so there's a bunch of different things, so, as we look at that facility and know more about what the constraints are going to be in terms of its use and whether you're gonna be a customer or an owner or what have you, we'll make that, we can have those discussions. Because we haven't looked in depth at the collection system to these areas and how they'd be connected, there may be the need for pumping stations associated with the facility, so we'd look at, we'd do our preliminary layout, see how well we'd be able to connect into the system, and whether or not we need to cite something, and so that we have an item in here to do some evaluation on that.
Does the sewer CAD project was done, about 10 years ago by you guys, give you much to work with on that?
Well, yes and no. So we based some of that information, but we had flows going to different locations. So depending on where we're collecting the flow from this area to go to Wampanoag might have been different back when we looked at it as part of the sewer CAD. So part of the analysis is just kind of, again, going back, looking at this, seeing where our connection point would be, how much collection system, because on the Mashpee Commons side, we might have a much shorter collection system to get from the schools.
And we're looking at the schools and
Understood.
additional area around there, not just the schools, yeah.
But so from the school's perspective, they may be closer, the neighborhoods may be a little further away, but with no connection points with regards to the Wampanoag's facility, you're gonna have a larger collection system, you're gonna have a longer run of new collection system that we have to look at as well, so.
Now, I don't know if it was figured into the design of what's out there that's connected the senior center and the police and fire stations to their system, but the schools were anticipated and are part of, in effect, an agreement that the town has with Mashpee Commons, that the town just hasn't moved forward on to tie in those two schools to their plant. So we'll probably have to look to the selectman's office for, whatever documentation there is about that, and obviously talk to Mashpee Commons about how they sized things when they were doing the connection to the police, fire, and senior center. And it was really the senior center that kicked off that connection there.
Yes, so that's all part of our,
One other
Yep.
thing for the record, there is a proposed affordable housing project that the town is talking about doing on the corner of Old Barnstable and Lowell Roads, which is adjacent to the St. Andrews Drive condos at Quashnet Valley. So there's some density up there in a proposed project that we may want to look at in terms of how this gets timed and all, and work directly with that potential affordable housing project there in terms of that system, if you weren't aware of it.
yep, okay. So those are, again, things, as we start off the project, we'll kind of work out a lot of those, or at least gather those details.
Looking at a lot of treatment capacity for these two plants, I would imagine what you said, that both of them are planned to be fully utilized by their current owners.
No. The Wampanoag absolutely is not. The Wampanoag was spectacularly oversized when it was built. The money was available from the federal government, and they built a 40,000-gallon RBC, and they're talking about a 52-unit housing project that would have flow of about 15,000 gallons. So we've already had meetings with them last spring, I guess it was, or even before that, about tying other things in. I know, for example, even beyond what our discussions were relative to, say, Town Hall in this area, tying into that plant, that Richard Halpern's property, whose commercial name I will not mention, he had been individually in contact with them about tying in, because he was looking to try to sell the property at one time. I don't know if he still is, but that would have involved a new system for his given the size of his property there.
So
close,
Mashpee Commons just upgraded and changed their processes, so I don't know enough about what they actually did when they redesigned that, to answer your question about how they designed it and whether it's an MBR, so they have, so it's a membrane facility, so typically membrane facilities can be modular, but I don't know if they built it and left themselves space, or they built it knowing that they were gonna have to expand the building to be modular, or what they did. So they could have built it and given them some extra capacity now to deal with future development, or they could have just built for what they needed right now, or somewhere in between. That's why we have to kind of go through
Yeah.
this exercise.
Yeah, and there's also the thing about, Title V numbers, which they're, versus reality in terms of when some excess capacity could be available just because of that. But, again, my understanding is that it's not the ultimate that they need, and so we're ultimately looking at expansion of that plant and discharge facility, unless and until it's tied to going down a new Seabury, as was in the
Yep.
old original plan pipeline.
So then task 5, we're looking at the hydraulic capacity of the existing collection system where we'd be making connections, but we're not going to look at all of Mashpee Commons collection system, just the part that we would be impacting with our connections. So whether that's one or two, or one or multiple locations, depending on how the neighborhoods would tie in, we just have to look at that. Then we'll develop estimates of probable cost, and we'll do that on various different technologies for the collection system, so that you can see them side by side.
Right.
And make some decisions on that.
Now, on that subject, the one thing that I'd been thinking about, because I knew we wanted to look at the different technologies, at one time, we had vendors for each of the three technologies, or at least for the vacuum and the low-pressure systems, come in and actually do us a plan, sort of as part of trying to sell their technology. Are we going to take advantage of that again, maybe contact them and let them
Probably not.
give us why would that be?
It will depend. I say probably not because we've been able to develop a lot of costs, and often when we get proposals from the manufacturers, we're spending more time on the details, and they're giving you sort of their big picture 40,000 view look, and we're trying to get away from that. We're trying to actually hone in a bit more and be a little more specific with regards to getting an idea of how the town might, want to repave their road or do something else, where they're going to be giving you bigger picture costs. I mean, we have to involve them at some point, depending on.
Maybe
I
useful to give us a starting point and then go from there.
I can't say. I have to see how big the collection system area is.
Mhm.
In some cases, it's not, if we're only talking, a few thousand feet of sewer, it's not going to be worth their while. Again, they are obviously the ones that know the most about their system, but they don't always know the most about the community in which they're putting the system in. Not to say that I do, but I'll at least be talking to you about getting some of more of the specifics. And I caution that they will, because they want to sell you their product, will come in with a cost that they want to do to win that job. And that's great, except for when you actually go to build it and it's not enough money.
Yeah, well, that's where you come in, is
Exactly, so I'd rather do it before and let them bid on the project after, and then we can deal with those kinds of things. But I guess my recommendation would be, review the costs that we develop, see how you feel about them, and then we can discuss whether or not you feel that you want to have them come in and do something on top of that. Again, I don't sell the collection system, so I don't have a vested interest in that kind of stuff. But I can also, having had experience in design and construction of the 3 systems that we're talking about, gravity, low pressure, and vacuum sewers, I've been experienced with all of them. So I can speak to how they go in and what problems that you have and things to watch out for and things to consider. The costs that we've seen from contractors bidding our projects have been fairly close to the things that we're doing, or less, which is good. But the last thing you want to do is come in low and be the low bidder on the project as the engineer. So that's my caution.
Yeah, wasn't so much talking about the cost as sort of the scheme. You know, they can be helpful in terms of developing a layout for you.
The way it works is
Particularly the vacuum, because
the vacuum is the vacuum is definitely more complicated.
Yeah.
But again, a vacuum sewer system operates on a lot of the same premise as a standard gravity system. So your pumping station is likely going to be in the exact same spot. It's just your pipes might be shallower because they can do their sawtooth configuration, but they have limitations on how far out they can go because of head losses and line losses and vacuum losses. So you have some limitation where a gravity sewer may be able to go for miles and miles and miles if topography is all downhill.
No, we don't have that.
I know, but
Other guys are going to be up and downhill around.
The point I'm making is there are things you can do with a gravity that you can't do with a vacuum, and then there are things you can do with a vacuum sewer that you can't do with a gravity. And so, but again, because a vacuum sewer system still requires you to be flowing downhill, it requires you to, you can't buck grade the whole time. You can't just go uphill. It just doesn't function that way. So your pipes still have to be sloping down towards a low point. You can step up and slope down, but you can only gain so much so far. It's kind of like staying level as opposed to just keeping going down. That's the difference. I think some people think that you can just, suck straight up, but it doesn't function in that same fashion. So,
Okay, well, that's details, so
Yep.
let's move on with the scope.
Practically look at the issues to upgrade some of these plants to get better treatment capacity. As I recall, neither of them are particularly good as far as.
Well, Mashpee
well,
Commons is
Mashpee Commons
very
is-
good now.
Yeah, you've got
with
about the
upgrades and
highest
BRs.
level of
It is?
Yeah,
treatment technology you can put in there. They have
Yeah.
membranes. So again, it also depends on how they designed it. So if they design their membranes only to operate, to treat to a certain level, that's what they're going to do. So you could either sacrifice capacity to get improved performance, or you have to expand in order to be able to improve the level of treatment or add processes onto it. But a membrane technology, the advantage is that you can have a higher process concentration of wastewater because of the way the system works. So they can be more compact, they're smaller units because of the fact that you're using membranes and things like that. So yes, we are going to be looking at each of these and identifying what the capacity is, and then what that future capacity might be, or what improvements you might need to make in order to meet the town's goals.
Good.
So that's,
As it gets bigger, it gets to start wagging the dog instead of the other way around. 180,000 gallons is huge, but double that, all of a sudden it's important to do pretty well.
yes.
is your mic on? Can you get your mic turned on, Mark?
I think you see
The light's not, no, the light's on. There you go, now your mic's
Oh.
on. Okay, thanks.
So as part of the collection system, we will also develop some 11 by 17 figures and plan view of the various different alternatives, and then once the town has selected an option that they want to move forward with, we can look at plans and profiles. And at that point, if vacuum sewer were, say, the most cost-effective, and you wanted to go with that in one of the different areas or both, that's a place where we might be then talking to AirVac and have them do it, because it'd be more cost-effective for them to run that information than, we can do it, but it's more complicated to design. Task deals with just reviewing the performance at the facilities and what that potential impact might be, and how it relates to the CWMP in terms of nitrogen removal. So, again, it's the idea of getting more facilities that are getting treated to remove nitrogen, and then, as we talked about, it's part of the CWMP. The first part is to get them onto existing infrastructure that performs a higher level of nitrogen removal, and then in future upgrades, looking at the possibility of improving performance or doing something else, or seeing how the shellfish are performing that may offset that need for a higher level of treatment. So it's kind of that balancing act. We also have in here some text to have some site visits from our electrical, HVAC, and structural groups to go out and look at the two facilities and give you an assessment of their systems that they have, code compliance, whether or not they're seeing any ill effects from moisture or an operational system that isn't functioning, like odor control or something like that. The Wampanoag is just sitting there, so if it's not...
It'd be hard to get any kind of history on that one.
No, but you'll at least be able to see you'll be able to assess the condition and see if the system is showing signs of, decline just by sitting there, essentially being mothballed. The structural analysis is really just a site walkthrough, kind of visual inspection type of thing. So what all this leads to is, as we identify...
I assume, at least with Mashpee Commons, I'd probably involve discussion with the operators too, to get their input on those issues, right?
Yeah, so in each of these different things, so in the site walkthroughs, we call for walking through the facility with the operators so that they can show us the various different electrical systems and alarms and things like that, so we can see if we want to test something or see that the fan's working or that kind of stuff, open a panel. They're there to assist in that process. Similarly, when we do the assessment of the treatment facilities, we want to meet with the operators to actually find out, what they know about the system, how they feel it performs, where they feel that there are areas that still could be improved, or what have you. Again, the Wampanoag is going to be hard because it's the only information we'll be able to get is when they did the startup test and how it ran during startup. I presume that they did that, so.
They did. Pure water test.
We'll also go through, as part of both of those, the treatment facilities and the site walkthroughs with, structural, architectural, structural, electrical, and HVAC, and identify data gaps. So if there are places where we feel we need additional sampling data, we'd review that, we'd identify those things, and the town would make the decision of whether they want to have that data gathered, who's going to pay for it, that'd be additional service, or whether they want to wait, or they don't feel that that's necessary, or what have you. So we'll discuss those kinds of impacts. Because like anything, when you're looking at an existing facility, they gather the data that they feel is appropriate. However, if they're not, say, all they want to do is meet permit, which is 10 milligrams per liter, but now we're looking at treating down to a higher level or doing something else, or we know that there are other parameters that the state might be wanting to look at in the future, we may want additional sampling done so we can get an idea of what they have now, so that as we're making the assessment with regards to performance, we can take those things into consideration. But we can't really do that until we start looking at the data. So the idea is early on, we want to try to gather that information. So early in the process, if we have to get some more sample data, we can gather that, and you can get something more than just a few snapshots. We could get something over a couple months, so we could actually see how it might be performing. And then the last task is really to deal with just the preparation of the report and documenting the findings of all the different evaluations.
Just from past history, I want to make sure that we've got enough meetings written into the contract, and
Well, that's where, this is where,
contingencies sort of written in, and how we're going to deal with contingencies when we do put a contract together.
what we haven't, what I didn't do is I've developed a cost estimate that we're reviewing internally, but I don't want to present that until, we gave you our estimate of about $100,000. That's what you went to.
Well, we
the
started out with that number, now
I
we're working
know.
backwards, basically, so.
Understood. So what we need to know is, we need to know what things are most important to you, where you want to have that, and set the criteria of what your expectations are for meetings and other things like that, so that we can make sure that they're built into the cost estimate, and then we can discuss what that impact is, and whether it means that we pare down something else, or we have plenty, or what have you. But until we have that kind of feedback from the sewer commission, it's we can't guess.
I just don't want to get in a situation where we run short.
Understood.
And we've only got the 100K, so, you know.
Understood.
If you want to overestimate the meetings, for example, with either the property owners or the commission, you know, or be say generous with that, I don't have a problem with that up front, as long as you understand. If we don't need to do the meetings, then it's, you know.
The other thing that I would recommend that you consider is that if the intent is to have, you know, me attend a whole bunch, you know, the sewer commission meetings every month, plus an extra meeting, and it's talking about all the different aspects, not only just this project, it would be good that this project focus on the meetings specific to meeting with the plant operators and things like that. And if you want out of a different budget, that's just like an on-call services type of thing, where it's, okay, we need you to come to this meeting, or we don't need you to come to this meeting. Otherwise, you could spend a lot of budget just trying to have me attend meetings
Yeah, I don't
that
think
you're
we
not getting.
need you to come to a meeting that's not relevant to either this project or the other project that's covered and not covered in that budget. I think we do need to do a supplemental, you know, contract with what little money we've got set aside beyond these two articles to cover those kinds of extra things. But just as we design this contract, I don't want to underestimate the amount of time you're going to have.
No, but I also don't want to burden this
You don't have to
contract
come to
with
every
like.
meeting, bottom line. And matter of fact, we don't have to have that many meetings if there's nothing to talk about. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's the bottom line, really.
So what I'd like to do is, if we put meetings in here, that they be focused on, okay, well, we want a meeting after this point, we want one meeting after the draft is developed, we want one meeting when the final's developed, and then if there are other meetings that have to do with multiple things, put those in another pot.
Yeah.
That would be, that way you're spending this budget on the things that are associated with specifically the evaluations and things like that, because that's where you're gonna be like, oh, by the way, could you look at this? And you're gonna wanna have budget available in your appropriation to deal with those, not necessarily having me come to a sewer commission meeting where we may be talking about this and the permit and other aspects. Do you know what I mean? So I think that would be, that's my advice.
Yeah.
But it's whatever you guys want to do. So.
All right, well, like I said, as long as there's enough to cover this subject, and based on our past history,
I got 15 years of
shy
meetings.
about, yeah, I mean.
I don't want to put 15 years of meetings in this.
No. And obviously, your timetable on this is going to be dependent on the other project, too. So it may be that we get started with this in terms of a scope, maybe looking at the plants, and then we have to sort of wait a little while until the MOUs get developed and then move on, so.
The one thing I would probably recommend is I would probably recommend not to move forward with this at all until your memorandums of understanding are squared with your two,
Those guys.
not necessarily in terms of ownership, but in terms of the evaluation part. So if you need to have an MOU or something that says, okay, you know, your operator is gonna be available, you're gonna you're gonna pull together these documents and provide that to the town, to provide to GHD or whatever that is, or, you know.
I'm not sure that we have to wait on that sort of thing, the evaluation. We've had pretty good cooperation and access from Mashpee Commons in terms of, you know, plant tours and all the rest, that some of those things about the plant, they may be important inputs to the MOU, you know, knowing how the condition of the plant and the rest, and the
I
capacity
guess
of the plant.
the
So-
one caution I have is
So
that,
it's, I see it as sort of a little iterative thing there.
I guess my caution is if we go through and they don't have an understanding of what types of recommendations might come out of this and what the ramifications are for them as the owner of that facility, then I think you want to have that worked out before, so that you don't have someone saying, well, we don't, you know, if for whatever reason we come out and say we go to a facility and for whatever reason, when it was designed and built originally, it was under one set of codes. But in order to be a municipal facility in the future with an upgrade, it's gonna have a whole bunch of other code requirements that weren't applicable before but are applicable now. So anytime you touch that facility and add to it, you're gonna have to do that. And if that has a cost ramification to anybody, then they wanna, I think you just wanna make sure that everyone's on the same page about what the report and the findings are gonna mean.
Yeah, but again, I think we start the conversations with them on the MOU. We're going to need some information about the plants in order to feel comfortable before signing anything. So that's why I see it as an iterative thing where, you know, they become aware of what we're doing through the conversations.
Yeah, and I
We
guess
do some analysis before we are comfortable.
I guess
on our-
maybe I'm not talking the final MOU in terms of the actual operation and ownership of the facility. I'm just talking about some kind of understanding or agreement between the facility and the town with regards to this part of the project.
Okay, yeah, okay, well, that's
You know
what
what I mean?
that-
Like, so
we're saying the same thing.
so
then.
you'd have
We're
something-
going to have conversations with them before we start this.
And it be documented that everyone understand this is what is, you know, how this is going to play out, so that you guys are all on the same page. What I'd hate to do is you know, us to get started on it and then stall, and that's where it gets, it's always good to kind of be able to kind of just work through the process. So, anyhow. So that's the general gist, and then, the second, section really just gets into tasks that we aren't going to be doing as part of this, so, or that we're gonna be looking for assistance from the town in gathering the information. We're not gonna do an II study on their existing collection system. We don't have budget in here to do additional sampling and data collection in terms of, you know, sampling and analysis of wastewater flows and, you know, or if there's other more detailed structural analysis or taking core samples or doing any of that kind of stuff. We're not doing any soil borings or survey, wetland delineations. There's no easement. We're not obtaining easements as part of this. This is kind of to give you the idea of, it may identify that you may need an easement, you know, either to cross a property or with regards to the ownership of the connection of the private, you know, a municipal sewer system into the private sewer system, and where they connect and when they leave public property to private property, that kind of stuff.
This is a lot of work that you're expecting the town to do. A lot of detailed, you know, getting liens and availability of
It's
liens,
not,
property ownership?
what it's saying is, it's not saying you have to do that, it's saying that that isn't in our scope right now to do. So
Right,
if
so-
there's an expectation that you want us to do those things, then we need to identify that now so that it's in the scope. Otherwise, we're going through. Unfortunately, again, this is draft, and this is taken from EJCDC, which is it's sort of the standard engineering contractor documentation, and it's typically done as part of construction. But they developed this because the standard contract language is often built from preliminary design all the way through bidding, all the way through construction. So I tried to take out some of the things that are very just straight construction bidding aspects of it. But there are other things that are part of planning and design, that this isn't a full-blown design and things like that. We're not doing those things. We're not getting easements and those kinds of, chasing down some of that. As you move forward, we may be tasked with some of those items, but right now, we're just identifying that as part of this report and study phase, and we're not doing those things. So,
See, we're even mentioning the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act here. It's part- Not sure how that falls into it, but maybe that's something you can explain one of these days.
Tom, I got a question. Now, you're saying on the Wampanoag facility, we might not be actually running it, we could be a customer.
Oh, absolutely, I think that.
Now, that's gonna
very
completely
likely.
change the scope of work, right? We're
No.
just basically gonna need an assessment as far as the tie-ins, and like you were saying, if you're gonna need pump stations, whatever.
You know,
But I mean, we're not gonna need any kind of evaluation of the facility, because that's pretty much a moot point,
well,
isn't it?
I think the evaluation will be more relative to the capacity and you know, the use, I mean, you know, that's a brand-new
It's-
plant, so there's not a lot to do, I don't think, with that one,
Well-
other than talking to Kevin Klein
Well,
and taking a tour.
Glenn raises a good point. So it may be that as you discuss with the Wampanoag how you want to proceed or how they want you to proceed and things like that, they may say, well, we wouldn't be doing anything with regards to our treatment facility. You can either connect or you can't connect. And then it will change this, because we just wouldn't evaluate. We just say, okay, then they're guaranteeing you that
Just-
they're gonna
just
meet
tell
their
us what the-
permit.
Just tell us how much flow we can put in, and
And
And I think
Where do the
that's
heights go?
probably close to where it's probably gonna go.
so we may,
Unless, you know, we haven't got even started a discussion on the details, but I mean, it may be that the tribe doesn't feel like they want to be responsible for, you know, operating the plant themselves.
true.
Maybe we
No, I
hire
gotta-
contractors to operate the plant, you know, that's all part of the MOU and the agreement we have with them ultimately.
no, I
but,
just got a question along that line. Do we need to have any kind of language like that in the contract that says after negotiating with the Wampanoags, that the assessment is not necessary, then, or we just basically go with this? And,
I think they
and then we
probably
just
should
don't do it.
put there should be some language that, you know, yeah,
I
if this
agree.
falls through, then obviously,
I
you know,
just want to make sure that all our bases are covered, that's
Yeah.
all. It's
no,
just-
I agree. That was part of when I lettered this off, is this assumes that, that had all been worked out, and, you know, this really this goes under the assumption that you're either taking it over, or they're going to be open to other kinds of improvements or other kinds of recommendations, or want you to do that evaluation. If that doesn't need to happen, then that piece comes out and we don't evaluate that piece. And so their part of the connection is more focused on the collection system, whereas I think the other one is going to be more focused on the capacity and the evaluation of the MBRs, with obviously some collection system, but I think it's going to be different.
and
In
the,
terms of
and
relative scope, the other one is much bigger, much more potential to impact our nitrogen discharge or ameliorate nitrogen from more properties. So it's really the one that deserves much more attention, I believe.
sure,
than-
because it's the one also that's got more potential for expansion, so we gotta look at what that potential is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, because it can only get so big over there. They have land set aside for expansion of that facility, but how much that is, we're gonna have to make that analysis to see what ultimately can be.
I mean, you double that size, it's a much bigger impact than doubling the Wampanoag's size, so.
Yep, so, like I said, as you review it, make those kinds of comments, suggest the language you want to see, and then we can work through whatever you want to do for that, and that'll help us also budget it. You know,
I think your concern with meetings is well placed, given our history in the last, my observation of the history in the last few years. Would it be possible for you to identify, I mean, on programs I used to always work, you identified meetings, they happened at a certain time, and there's a certain purpose for it. Rather than just have an update in February, why don't we have a meeting to review certain kinds of statuses whenever it's appropriate at your, your recommendation? Say, look, these are the meetings I thought we ought to have. We ought to have a data review, a plant review, who knows what, upgrade review, that sort of thing.
Yep.
I think that's the way he's structured it.
Yeah, but there's not,
Called out.
again, because,
Because we don't need to have a meeting at every particular step. I mean,
No, but you could identify the steps
Yep.
rather than have him come to our meeting when he's not really ready to come and he's sort of
Oh, yeah,
halfway done
no.
his task.
And we, as I said, we don't even have to have a meeting, let alone have Jeff here, if there's nothing that is appropriate to discuss and it is not worth the cost of doing it, so.
so
I was just saying, don't go cheap on the meetings because of our history, so.
yeah, and that's, again, to answer Mark's question, I can put some things in there. I'd look for your input in terms of what your expectation
Yeah.
is.
Give us a
And the-
proposed listing of places where you think you might need our input, and then,
And
We'll react to
then,
that.
lastly, like I said, I would highly recommend that out of, either your other CWMP, nutrient management, SRF kind of budget, or as part of, the other services or something like that, that's where you build other, meeting aspects.
because there may be meetings that are about the watershed permit, certainly the MOUs coming out of that other budget,
The- the-
that will have to be worked into that.
The thing that I see that gets difficult is if I build in meetings here and we talk about 3 different subjects, and I'm trying to remember, well, I spent, 30 minutes of the meeting talking about this, and 45, and then there was the travel to get there, and I had to prep beforehand, and I'd rather be able to say, if I'm coming to sewer commission meetings, they're just kind of out of some other pot. But if I came here to give you an update on, here's the proposed plan, this is the and the whole meeting is basically just focused on that, then that's what I'd like to have in here. These are just meetings that are strictly specific to that and that kind of aspect.
My off the top of the head would be, do that plus 1. Because there's gonna be a plus 1 somewhere.
There's no schedule in here.
I hadn't developed that either,
Well, that
because,
usually
Well, the
helps you
schedule is gonna-
understand where the meetings ought to be, because you've got schedules and milestones, and then it tells you, oh, the meeting here. And if the schedule sort of goes to hell after 6 months, the milestones would go with it, so the call for a meeting would go with it, so you wouldn't be doing an unnecessary meeting, it would just be delayed.
Right,
Yep.
well, again, the schedule is sort of intertwined with the schedule of the other contract, with the watershed permit and the IMAs and MOUs, so particularly the MOU deals. So, the schedule is probably points in time, where we're gonna do something, but we don't know the exact dates of those, because we don't know how the other side's gonna go. Again, we don't know how long it's gonna take to develop an MOU or to get
yeah, but I think that
part of
this,
it
I
done.
think that this could be done, this evaluation can be done, I believe, independent of the watershed permit work and the
I'm
MOU
thinking more of the
development.
MOU development.
Well, I think that the reality is the MOU is gonna come out after you kind of see, well, what are you buying, or what are you not buying, or what are you gonna get, or where are you gonna connect, or how are you gonna do it? Because then it puts you in a position of, well, we need to, and they know kind of what you're trying to negotiate for.
Well, that's almost different than what you said before.
No, the other part was, I wanted you to have some understanding with those parties with regards to what the evaluation is.
Okay, exactly.
So there's two steps. So I look at it as, one, the understanding with the Wampanoag, we are not evaluating your facility at all. If they just, if that's the agreement that comes out and they say, okay, you're not evaluating, all we're gonna do is we're either accepting your flow or, it's kind of like a switch. It's on or off kind of thing, and then you can do your evaluation for what connects. And Mashpee Commons says, we're doing with this with the understanding that any recommendations that you make are going to be part of us transitioning this facility over to you, and then you're gonna own it, and you're gonna have to pay it, and then you're gonna say, well, part of that would be, well, some of these things were things that you need to fix before we take it on. Whatever that agreement, you can start with the understanding that there'll be some discussion about that, but they understand we need to go through this process, as opposed to them saying, no, well, you can't come into the facility today because we haven't worked out the MOU on who's gonna own this stuff, so we're not gonna let you do that. And then I'm sitting here waiting to do an evaluation that I can't do because the first part of the negotiation was, well, we're not gonna do that until we have the MOU. So you need to do that first step and make some kind of agreement, now, whatever you call that. And then afterwards, there's the official document of the understanding of the operation or ownership or whatever it is of that facility. And at that point, that's when you can take the information that you would have developed as part of this report, and then you've negotiated, yes, we own Mashpee Commons, and they sold it to us for $1, but as part of that,
Not
they,
like that.
I know, but I'm just saying.
No, I think that's exactly what I was saying, though. We have this discussions up front, everybody understands where we're going.
But you gotta document
Do
that,
this
that's
thing.
gotta be documented somehow.
Yeah. And
In whatever
you have to
mechanism
figure
it is.
under either source of funds that you're gonna be at the table at some of those conversations with them in developing that discussion. And developing that initial agreement, and probably ultimately in the MOU as well, because we need your expertise, so.
And that's fine. Like I said, I don't wanna go down the road of, we start the evaluation, and the first thing we say is, well, we need to have some additional sampling done, because we need this, nitrogen value that you only get once a month, and we really want it once a week for 2 months, and the
Well, isn't-
town and Mashpee Commons say, meh, we're not gonna do that.
Well, I mean, that's something you'd be telling us. Why would you anticipate something like that?
Yeah, I do, because if your facility.
Is that
if you want it
put into this scope then?
So what we have in the scope is, we're going to identify where those data gaps are, but we don't know what the data gaps are because we haven't reviewed your data.
All right, well, they obviously do their monthly reports.
Okay, the point is, you want to make sure that you and the Wampanoag and Mashpee Commons are all on the same page on what this evaluation is, and what, doors are open or closed with regards to the evaluation.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you're gonna have a whole nother memorandum of understanding of, okay, now that we've done this and we've seen what the conditions of all these things are, you guys will negotiate the ownership or operation or connection fee or whatever it is for using those facilities.
I think we're saying the same thing,
but
we've done it a couple times
Yeah,
now.
they're just two different,
Understood.
they're just two different steps.
And sometimes you've got to be pretty far along in that MOU before you're even ready to start this job, I would think. I mean, this thing about, we talked about the Wampanoag, whoever it is, you go to them and say, hey, I want to use your facility for this, what's it going to cost? Well, I don't know, it depends on what we do, and you're going to go back and forth a lot like that before you get around to deciding, okay, it looks like this is the right plan, we're going to double the size of your facility, we're going to add pipes and whatever, but until you get.
Well,
Well,
and that's the decision, that's the MOU,
Down the line.
that's the final MOU that comes
That's not the
out
first discussion.
after you've had that. So I look at it as saying, you have the initial discussion, you have some form of agreement, a letter agreement, whatever it is, between them and you saying, okay, we agree that, if GHD is hired, then GHD is gonna come in and they're gonna perform these tasks, and they're gonna work with you, and they're gonna work with the town, and you guys are gonna help them get the data they need, and then they're gonna do the evaluation. And when that's all done, that information is going to help form the basis for your actual MOU that you'll negotiate, whether it's a it's connection or whatever,
So
so.
have different options, so the Wampanoags, you may double the size, or you may not, or you may run it, or maybe not, so.
Yep.
But you'll have to do all options then. You don't have to look at option one, all they do is hook a pipe up. Option two, they double the size. What kind of plant would you put in, how good would it work? You'll be looking at that.
Again, it depends.
Not
yes.
necessarily.
Not necessarily. It depends on whether or not, if they say it's just gonna be, you're gonna be a customer, and then we're not gonna be evaluating their plant, then that whole piece falls out, and all we just say is.
Yeah, because we have a proposed plant right down the road from that thing to, so we've just
Yeah.
taken advantage of what existing excess capacity there is in that existing plant as it is.
Yep.
I don't think we're ever talking about doubling that. That's how we sort of gave it a fairly small collection area. We just have to make sure that that's feasible within that existing plant in terms of capacity. Again, Mashpee Commons is a different story because there's potential for much more expansion over there and public ownership.
And it's a much more complex process.
Yeah, so I think we understand each other.
Okay.
We've got to get you in the door legally,
Yes.
basically on paper, that you're going to be working with them, and that's the first agreement. And then you get the work, and that'll contribute towards what we end up with in an MOU.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just curious, under the owner's responsibilities,
Yep.
this curious thing here about J and K, not used. What's that?
Oh, just because it used to say like,
I
bidding.
assume this is a draft, because
Well, it's draft, the reason it's.
what J or K is.
The
that we're not
reason it's,
using.
okay, so in contract language, especially with stuff like this, when it has cross-references to other things, when you delete an item and it cross-references from somewhere else, and it says, well, in section B 2.01A, and you deleted A, then A is not the same A that they were making reference to. So we tend not to delete out the numbers if we don't have to, we just put not used. So what
And
that.
this is from a standard contract that you just want to keep the same?
Well, yes, a lot of this, up into the last item,
Yeah.
is primarily standard language that comes from EJCDC, that
What is EJCDC?
it's the, you're gonna ask me that. It's the Engineering Joint Council, I can't remember what the heck this stupid thing.
So basically, you're just working up a boilerplate that's,
So, this group below here, the National Society of Professional Engineers, the American Council of Engineering Companies, and American Society of Civil Engineers, work with lawyers and contractors, and they've developed boilerplate language for contract documents, for agreements, for specifications, all those different kinds of things. And it's like it's equivalent to, what is it, AIA, the Architects Institute standards or whatever it is. It's just a form of standard language. So the not used items were things, I could have left it in there. It's like, we aren't gonna, the owner's gonna deal with all the bidding and other things. It's all construction related and bidding related. I knew that it could come out. I may have missed a couple, like the one, well, I may have missed some in there.
But you're just
but
saying you
essentially-
want to keep this lettering system because it's a standard contract
I can
format.
get rid of them,
rather
Tom,
than
if you
just-
really, because this doesn't really tie into it. It's just a force of habit. When I edit this stuff, I tend not to, until I've gone through the end, I tend not to delete out those things, because in other EJCDC documents, which I know must be boring everybody with this stuff, but if you delete 9.0.1, but later on in your document, you were making reference to, in paragraph 9.8.1, well, it doesn't exist anymore, or it's the wrong paragraph, so it doesn't make any sense. So I tend to
Right.
just put in the not used. So you can cross them out, and we'll go through them, and we'll make sure that they're not, it's not relevant.
this is just saving you from recreating the wheel,
So
right? It's just,
it tells me, too, that if I pulled this and wanted to use it for another one of your projects, and I could look and say, why was B not used? Well, it was not used because I might want to add that back in because now it's a construction phase service or something like that.
Okay, we'll learn to live with it, even though it seems a little weird. Okay, so, obviously, we're gonna wanna look through this to see
Yep.
whether there are things
Why it's
on
draft.
this, I suspect there are things that are on this list of owner responsibilities that we're gonna be expected to do during this process that may cost us something, so we're gonna have to go through that thoroughly and, understand what you're expecting of us, because
Yes, exactly.
some money's gotta come from somewhere.
And some of them may be not, if, as you're reviewing it, you say, you know what? We don't want this in there, and we take exception to it and things like that. We could have the discussion over what the actual item is and whether or not we even think that it'd be something that you would be asking us to do or assuming that we would be doing. And if not, then we can have it deleted. It's not a big deal. A lot of it's geared towards, hey, we're engineers, we're not lawyers, we're not, financial planners, we don't do all that bonding stuff. We aren't doing a lot of the legal land transfers and chasing down liens and doing title searches but there are other things at the end which are more of the things that are more general that you might expect that we'd be doing that we aren't doing because we would do those as part of design services, like survey or borings or infiltration and inflow studies or, the data analysis and collection. The reason we don't put it in there is because they may have that data, but we don't know, or we may not find that it's necessary. They have all the data we need, we don't need anything. But there might be in discussions with, all of a sudden we sit with DEP, we've been working on the project for 6 months, and they say, well, you know what, we really want to know what all the TOC is. Even though you're not in a zone 2, we want to know what the total organic carbon is of coming out of this treatment plant, because you're going to have a limit in the future anyways. That's great, but we never thought that we were going to have to deal with that, and so that's something where now we'd have to come up with a protocol, and we'd say, okay, we'll come up and we can identify what that might be, but we weren't carrying that budget. So if the town wants to get that to satisfy DEP, they'll need to go out and get the funds to do that
Do
additional
you
sampling
see
and analysis.
any necessary interaction with DEP at all at this, with this contract at this phase? I mean, I'm not picturing we're not going for any permits or anything.
No, I don't. Sometimes we will talk to them about whether or not we feel that there's something coming down the regulatory pike that we want to be aware of.
Yeah,
But I don't anticipate that at this point.
yeah, well, I didn't.
But again, that's not the.
We may want to, I assume the Mashpee Commons may have done some review of that. And the idea will be to get that data from them.
And the first item is having you basically assist us in getting a lot of the data that we list in the first task item, which is the data review. So.
Thank you, that would be me.
So anyhow.
Okay, so, we'll take a look at this. What do you want us to do at this point with this and before you draft up an actual contract proposal?
Do you want me to send you a Word copy that you can redline? Would you prefer that? And then I can do that, and then you can distribute it how you want it and redline it, and then you can compile your comments and get them back to me?
That would be, sure. I mean, yeah, why don't you do that?
And that's,
We'll pass it around, see if anybody's got any real serious issues with anything here.
that's the
We'll get it all
easiest.
back to you in one lump. And what I'll ask is that you send it to me, I'll send it out to you guys, and you guys get your comments to me so I can consolidate them before we send it off to Jeff.
In the general, just so you know, because the terms and conditions, like in that
And
other.
also, send me an email if you don't have any comments, so I know not to be waiting.
So the other document that we sent you for the work, for the analysis of the nitrogen, the difference in approaches,
Yeah.
that had the boilerplate language that you raised questions about, the terms and conditions. That's, obviously, it's been 15 years since you've seen our terms and conditions, and we've changed them a number of times
Yeah,
since then.
and the
So,
bottom line, though, is we're gonna have town council look at all of these.
so the idea is that those would be the same as these, so I didn't send you a copy of those again. So we would presume that you would make the comments on that. What I would say is that your town council may say, for this one, we might treat those terms and conditions this way, and for this one, we might treat those terms and conditions differently because they're different projects.
Mhm.
They may or may not, but just have them do that in the context of, you know, both scopes of services. Do you know what I mean?
Vaguely.
Well, they may say that in.
Because
the
I'm
terms and
assuming
condi-
that once we give you our comments on the scope, you'll give us another one of these incorporating the scope and that other language.
Correct. What I'm trying to avoid is, say it takes a month, or, I don't know, every lawyer works differently on how high up the food, you know, how high up their pile of importance that this agreement and the standard language is. So depending on where it sits in their pile, if it, say, it takes them a month to get through and get the comments and back and forth and figure out what they want to do, to then have, if it's the same, if the front end isn't going to change, we just assume take those and incorporate those comments into here. If they review it in the context of knowing that it's for two different agreements that have two different scopes, they may strike something in one and not necessarily want to strike it in the other. All I'm asking is that they do it once, as opposed to then we get that back, then we give you this, and then we have to wait another month for them to review it again.
Well,
Or maybe
and
where
that's
it's the
why I'm
same
suggesting that you put it together into a document, and we'll send them both off to council. But just so you know, Andy has kindly made me the lead on his contract too, so I've got
Okay.
to deal with this.
Well, I just
And,
thought that you would,
You're going to have a delay with council anyways, because he's, I was wondering, it was not knee surgery, hip surgery.
It's holidays too.
In the
and all that
holidays,
stuff.
so I wouldn't anticipate everything getting done real quick, so maybe if, what's a reasonable time frame to get comments back to Jeff on the scope on this? If we get, say, we get electronically tomorrow and I email it out to you guys, how long do you think you need to review it?
3 weeks, maybe?
3 weeks? Oh,
The first week is shot, right? I'm just looking at Fed, okay, from now until Thanksgiving.
oh, okay, I'll give it 2 weeks. How about
I was gonna say 2 weeks.
Thanksgiving, if you get
Yeah.
on it from our point of view, from my point of view, then,
Well, I'll give you 2 weeks.
yeah,
Because what, the bottom line is, I want Jeff to have that back, to be able to put together one of these, so we can have town council look at both of them at the same time. And I'll specifically ask that it be done that way. So in effect, hold off on this until we get that
That's fine.
together.
I mean, that's essentially what I was getting at, as I want them to look at it at the same time, as opposed to looking at one and then
Right.
a month later looking at another one, and then, you know.
And theoretically, we have a third contract, unless, you know, you're comfortable continuing to operate on modifications of the 2000 contract for the other services, that we've continually done amendments to that contract to cover little things. If you think we need a new contract, probably with a lot of the same basic fine print as these, to cover
I'd have to talk.
additional services.
I'd have to talk to my
The third
bosses at this
contract,
point.
yeah.
I think they're elated that I was able to close the other one, so, I'll talk to
It's
them.
almost closed. We're gonna find a way to get you to the meeting in May, so
So,
we'll call it a meeting about the watershed permit.
there you go. I'll talk to them about what they would prefer to see, and then,
You're gonna send us a Word or some kind of editable document. I'd sure like to see your understanding of what milestones you might have.
okay,
And associated with that, what inputs? You know, we've got all this crap about owners responsible for all this stuff. That's great, but in specific, not in great detail, but what sort of inputs do you really expect from the town?
okay.
You know, and when? You know, like, okay, in the first quarter of the project, I've got to have this kind of data, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that the reality is, the first one is the only thing that we need this list of data. That's what we're looking for. And then after that, the rest of it comes out as we get
There's
the,
a lot of data there, but, okay, well, who are you going to get the operations data? Do you expect Tom to go over to Mashpee Commons and say, hey, guys, I need your operations data for
Well,
that
it's-
last 5 years? Or are you going to do it?
so, again, it comes down to, I can't answer that because I don't know what the agreement is between the town. I could call and pester the guy, the operator there, but you know what? He doesn't owe me anything.
Right.
And he's gonna say, it's taking time out of my day and I'm not getting paid for this, so why am I chasing this down?
Right.
Until there's some form of understanding or agreement between the town and that facility with regards to getting this stuff, the idea is, we ask for the town to assist us, meaning once that agreement's set up, then I can call the guy and say, hey, I'm looking for this. Now, if it goes a week and I haven't heard anything, then I'm gonna call Tom and say, Tom, I need the town to start asking for this because I'm not getting a response, that
I
kind of stuff.
understand that, but you look at the scope here, you've got to evaluate treatment capacity for each
I'm not-
major. But if the Wampanoags say, we'll give you 25,000 gallons, that's it. You don't
We-
have to worry about their treatment capacity.
But we already talked about that. Then, yeah,
So-
again, if you,
You gotta have some baseline of what
I-
your understanding would be.
Mark, that's why we need the agreement between the town and those facilities with regards to
Exactly.
what the expectation is. So I'm not gonna do anything until I have
Okay, so
that.
that would be right at the beginning.
That's-
Here's the key input.
That's,
MOU
that's,
signed or
that's,
outlined
yeah,
or whatever.
that's the number one item.
Yeah, I think we've covered that subject sufficiently tonight. It's getting, time's moving on here. Okay, action study, new contract, MOUs, okay. Can we go to voucher signatures? So you're gonna get us again, a Word version of this
Yep.
tomorrow, and I'll pass it around. You guys will have 2 weeks to make comments, and please let me know as soon as you can whether you get comments or not, so I'm not waiting around beyond
Try
that.
to get that milestones in there
We have,
shortly thereafter, if you can't get it in that.
we
word
have a-
agreement you sent.
Okay.
we
Yeah,
have
I
a
don't know if
billing.
I'll get that for tomorrow, but,
No.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have a billing from GHD for $488.04. This is, as far as the GHD concerns, their last billing under our SRF loan. Even though it's gone beyond what's budget, what's in the SRF loan to pay GHD, apparently, the state didn't have a problem paying the last bill, which was already over their budget. So we'll submit this, and we'll have a little bit of money left. And that is money that is probably going to be used in some fashion for paying SMAST for something, because that's the way it's allocated in the SRF. I don't want to give up any of that zero-interest money and say, no, take it back. We may need that. It may go towards, for example, a Municus study or something like that. It's only probably end up being about $1,500, but and that's some part of what I'm going to be talking to Andy about tomorrow, is how we fund some things. And I'm gonna put Matt on the spot in a little while, but any case, can I get a motion to pay this bill? It's an amount of $488.04 for.
I make a motion to pay the GHD bill of $488.04.
I second a motion.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right. Good. You're paid. Your job is done. Not really, but.
No, I know. I can close out a 15-year-old job, that's,
Okay, intermunicipal additions, issues, watershed permit, IMAs, again, that's, you've seen the initial scope for what Andy is looking for Jeff to do to help him with the IMAs, and the watershed permit, the Papaneset watershed permit specifically, and as far as this scope goes. And just, unless, you got anything else to say about that? Okay. Regarding MMR utility planning, I spoke to Carter Hunt maybe 2 weeks ago. He indicated to me that he believed that the Air Force was going to have their study done and released sometime in December, and that they anticipated beginning negotiations between Mass Development and the Air Force in January. So hopefully things will be moving along there, and we'll get some sense for the next few months whether or not the treatment plant at the base will become available, and under what terms, and who will be owning it, et cetera, et cetera. So there seems to be a light at the end of that tunnel that's gone on for a long time. Falmouth issues, Municus River Study Proposal, status of county grant, local matching funds, a report from Jerry Thomas or others. Matt, you're others. Could you just come up and give us an idea of what's been going on with that? I did get a little bit of a email from Andy because I had not been in the loop on that since we had our meeting at Burger King with Eric and the rest. And how much did the county provide, and what's the overall cost of that project?
The overall cost of the project is $43,500. The county collaborative committed to half of that, 21,750.
That's not half. That's less than half.
That's half.
21,750.
Yeah.
Well, 43,500, that's not half of 43,500.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
it is. I mean, I did the math, so.
What was your number again?
21,750.
21,750.
Oh, 750.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
Falmouth,
So what is so 21,750 is the remainder again, that needs to be covered by the towns?
well, we've got, Falmouth committed to, first of all, Citizens for the Protection of Wacoit Bay committed to 2,500, and the Mass Environmental Collaborative committed to 500.
Mashpee Environmental Coalition, please.
Mashpee Environmental Coalition.
Yes.
Got that all.
Now, is that coming off out of Falmouth share, or out of Mashpee share, or off
What I
the top,
did
or
is-
what?
What I did is I just, I added those two together and subtracted it from the second half, and divided Mashpee and Falmouth up equal.
Oh, okay.
So it comes to.
So is there a specific number that the Falmouth Selectmen voted on?
Not to my knowledge. They voted to fund their share. All this had to be worked out because we didn't know what the Mashpee Environmental Collaborative
Coalition.
Coalition would do.
What's their share? Now,
Talking 10K.
whose
So we-
opinion of their
so-
share do
so
we
what
go
I
by?
can tell you what the towns-
You know what my opinion is, but
comes to, for the towns, is 9,375.
that's assuming we believe our share is equal to Falmouth share, et cetera. Okay.
That's true,
9,375?
yeah.
All right. Now, my understanding from Andy was that he was expecting that there would be a letter from the Falmouth Selectmen to the Mashpee Selectmen looking for the Mashpee Selectmen to contribute, and they were waiting for that,
I could make sure that happens. I don't know if that was,
because that's going to be a Board of Selectmen decision, and then we're going to have to go searching for the funds, which we don't have allocated anywhere in particular. And that's why I had to tell you and Eric that I couldn't commit Mashpee to anything, because I don't have a pot of funds for $9,375.
$22.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's spent.
That's our commission's budget.
That's gone.
we have till the end of June from the county collaborative. They've given us that amount of time to get our act together.
To complete the study, or,
No,
what?
to get
The money.
get the funding,
oh,
because we knew Mashpee would have difficulty.
so theoretically, a special town meeting article could be needed, or we could find some other source of funds.
Yeah.
So the end of June?
Well, the new fiscal year, whatever it is, yeah, end of June.
Yeah, June 30th.
June
like
30th.
Up with the money. Now, is there any sunset date on the county's money?
Yeah, the end of
End of the fiscal year.
the fiscal year.
No, I'm talking about their money. You said having us, we had until the end of June to come up with our share of the money, but their money doesn't disappear in June, in May, July, does it, the 21,000?
Probably not, but this is a large chunk of the remaining money that they have.
Right, but is it a fiscal year thing that's coming out of, and it disappears?
No, I don't think so, Tom. I think it was just them saying, if you don't act on this quickly, or not quickly, but before the end of the fiscal year, we're probably going to look for something else to spend the money
All
on.
right, because I want to understand whether or not they're talking about completing the project before then, or just agreeing
No.
to funding our share of it
Yes.
before
lot.
then.
A lot of times, what town or municipalities want to see is the money encumbered by the end of the year, and then you have a couple of years to spend that money.
The impression I got from that
So-
meeting is that they just didn't want Falmouth and Mashpee to sit for a year trying to decide who was gonna pay for what. They said basically, if you guys can agree and you can do it by June 30th, then they'll foot half the bill. Is that correct, Matt? Isn't that what you interpreted that?
So again, so it's agree by the end of June 30th, and I'm sure we can do it well before that, but not have to actually spend the money before the end of June.
No.
Okay, that's what I was trying to clarify. Okay, because we're going to have to contract with somebody, I assume it's UMass Dartmouth. Is there, because I haven't seen anything in terms of the scope that UMass gave you for that 43,000 or anything like that? If you guys have got
All I
that.
have is a summary. I could leave you with a summary, but the Water Quality Committee has that complete document.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously should get that because we want to know what we're helping to pay for. And I'm sure the selectmen are going to want to see that too. And how do you see the contracting going now? Is Falmouth going to contract with them and directly from the town of Falmouth to UMass Dartmouth, and then we'll be expected to just send money? Or do we end up somehow getting involved in the contract?
That's agreeable to you. Actually, it hasn't been discussed, Tom, so,
Yeah,
but if
because that's the kind of thing's got to be worked out, who's going to manage the contract. And,
I think, we have the staff at the Water Quality Management Committee.
yeah, and we don't, so please.
So we could do that.
Yeah.
Well,
You can't speak,
just a
I know,
number,
you're,
I don't know.
exactly.
I'll bring
Yeah.
it up.
But that's what I would assume would be the way to go. Okay. Anything else going on in Falmouth we ought to know about? Anything cool happening with your alternative, no, not wind turbines. I'm talking about wastewater related. Any news on any of your shellfish things, or your alternative septic system project?
The shellfish studies are going very well, and we're moving forward. We're going to expand them, and the oysters are great.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Are they edible, or are they in polluted areas?
For 6 months.
Oh. Okay. All right. And what about the where you're trying to bribe people into taking composting toilets or whatever else you were doing over there, the alternative
Yeah,
systems?
that's going on.
How many people bought into that, and where's that stand?
How many?
Yeah, because you're looking for what,
It's roughly
25?
16
Yeah.
that either committed to composting toilets or urine diverting toilets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people.
Are those installed now and they're being
Oh, yeah.
studied?
They've been installed for probably close to a year or maybe more.
Okay, how many of each?
I think, I don't know exactly, but I think there were 3 installations of urine diverting toilets, and the rest were
So the other were composting?
composting.
Oh, okay, all right. Because the urine diverting ones are obviously the more fascinating ones, given the disposal
it's
issue and all the
funny,
rest.
They're starting to get some data back
Mhm.
from George Heufelder. They're doing an analysis of the nitrogen. And the composting toilets are super. They're
Mhm.
getting 90% or more of the nitrogen out of the waste stream. The urine diverting toilets, for some reason, and there's some speculation about why, but they're only performing a little bit better than 50%. But that was in the first 6 months, and nobody really had an explanation for it.
Is George going to be putting together a report at some point with the
Yes.
results? Any idea at a time frame for that?
He's already put together an initial report, like a midway report or
Mhm.
something, and so he will put together a completed report after a year or more, maybe. I don't know. I can't remember exactly.
Can we get a copy of his initial report? Just to
I'm sure you can.
keep track of things? Because part of our
Mr. Chairman, you're really
Let's go.
loading me up with work.
well, hey, you were foolish enough to show up at our meeting, so you're carrying a load for Falmouth. Good man.
Volunteer.
Matt Patrick, your future state rep.
So.
Consider this campaigning,
The Heufelder report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because part of our plan, you know, says that we're going to continue to look at these kinds of alternative technologies, so that, you know, any information we can get from any sources, you know, we want to be able to get a hold of and have Jeff get a hold of, and unless you've already got it from GHG's work in Falmouth.
No, but, you know, the sewer commission may want to extend an invitation to Sia, I would say, and she could probably give you sort of a compilation presentation on the shellfish, the West Falmouth Harbor septic system, INA system one, and the eco toilets, and maybe she could put something together, you know, if you put a request to her to present some of the, I mean, I imagine she's probably presented that
Give you a much better
stuff.
presentation than I am currently.
Well, maybe in the depths of the winter when we have, you know, we're bored with other stuff, we'll ask Matt to ask Sia. Because
Well,
obviously, I don't put her through, you know, having to put together a fancy presentation if she isn't already doing it, say, for your water quality committee or something like that.
Maybe we
she
can invite
does.
you to that presentation
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
But I'll mention it to her and see what
yeah,
she says.
okay, good. Okay, I think we've wrung everything we can out of you. Oh, except Mark wants to hit you with something,
I
all
just have
right.
a question, yeah.
Yep.
I know there's been some discussion in Falmouth about who's gonna pay for the capital and maintenance costs for some of the individual
Oh.
pumping. What's going on there?
That was for the grinder pumps.
Yeah,
And I missed the last night of town meeting where they decided on that question. There was, originally, it was proposed that the homeowners would own the grinder pumps,
right,
and there were 700 of them going in that
and
little pond
maintain.
area. And they would be responsible for the maintenance. Somebody filed a citizen's petition to get the town to consider, and it was a non-binding
Yeah.
article, to consider making those town property and being responsible. And I guess there are other towns in the Commonwealth that do that. And it's tricky because if it's on
Right,
private property, technically it doesn't qualify for betterments. So, but there are ways to do that. You could be in the right-of-way that the town owns on the street.
Well, you could take an easement or
Easement.
a license, get a license that would give you a property
All of
interest.
that.
Yeah.
There was another even better proposal compromise, and again, I apologize, I don't know what happened last night. But there was a compromise that I thought of and I proposed to the gentleman who was the lead sponsor of the article. And that was that the town organize just a regular maintenance for, it would be like an insurance plan.
yeah.
Everybody pay 50 or $100 a year, and the town would put a guy on the road with a truck who would ride around and fix these things.
But you don't know which way the town lent.
I don't,
I
and
Well, the
it
first,
should be in tomorrow's paper. actually.
because the first one was actually, they voted for the policy, because I went to the one on the third night of town meeting, where they voted for the Article 24, was it? That said, the non-binding, they were looking for the town to come up with a policy to deal with the ownership. But I don't know if there was another article after that. I wasn't
No,
aware of.
So maybe you're, maybe I just didn't remember.
For the town to not just come up with a policy, the policy could be homeowners own it. That's not what they want.
Yeah, well, it was a policy for the town to,
Gotcha. Town
the
manager.
town to operate. Now, I don't remember the full text of the article, so I can't remember what exactly they voted to, but it was a favorable vote at town meeting for them in terms of that article. So the selectmen,
How much attention I paid.
Town
the selectmen said.
Maybe get a hold of that article and send that to us too,
It
Beth.
happened at 11:30 at night, so I
Oh,
don't,
yeah.
oh, was it? I
It must
thought
have been the last night.
it was the last night, and
Okay, so I wasn't there.
it was night
Trying to
3.
make me feel old, I think.
No, it was the last, it was definitely on the
Third night.
Thursday after the holiday, and
So
it
the sense
was,
of the meeting, the sense of the town non-binding vote was that the representatives voted that the town take responsibility for these stations and maintenance.
well, I don't
Come
wanna,
up with a resolution
I don't
on
wanna,
that.
yeah, I don't wanna quote what basically, whatever Article 24 said, which I believe was for the selectmen to develop a policy with regards to, them taking, maintenance of it, that was voted favorably by town meeting. But, like I said, it was, pretty sure it was like 11:30 at night, so, and then they had like 4 more articles that they still had to get through, so I was.
That's one of the things you gotta think about when you pick a collection system is, that's one of the main problems I have with the grinder pump systems, is that whole issue.
It's not my grinder pump system, please.
I didn't say yours, I said.
Oh, I thought
with
that's what you
grinder-
said.
No, not yours. You don't sell those things.
No.
All right. Okay, so, yeah, so if you can send us that Article 2, you've got 4 things to do now, Matt.
The article. No, that's the 6th thing, Tom.
6? Okay.
Who's counting?
Who's counting? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I can.
You don't want to tell us about what's going on in Barnstable Sandwich, do you, Matt? Not having a representative?
Really be stretching it then.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Tim.
All right.
I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
You are done.
Okay.
You are done. All right, other items. I think I sent out the fiscal year's 2017 CIP budget that I submitted to you guys by email?
I didn't see it.
You didn't? Okay. I should have done that. I will do that tomorrow. I didn't bring it to the meeting. Basically, we had to budget for 7 years of capital improvements, and then a number for everything we're gonna need after that. So I used,
Is that the one we worked on the last meeting?
Yes.
yeah, and we ended up with, I think it was about $2,850,000 for like May town meeting, the next May's town meeting is a 2017 number. And 2018 is a similar vein, and then gets really gigantic in 2019 and 2020, when we actually start building the T4, designing and building the T4 plant and the Site 4 plant and the
I like that name, T4.
T4. I'm thinking of well sites, because it was town land, it was a T and a T. Okay. Any case, so if I didn't send that out, I will send that out to members. Again, status GHD funding, SRF loan, done. Hopefully we get this bill paid. The EPA grant proposal for PRB studies. One of the 4 sites that Mashpee proposed has been selected for this investigation by USGS in terms of the hydrogeology in a part of town. Is what they call the Timber Landing site. It's actually basically along River Road between the Sandalwood subdivision and the Mashpee River. We did a site visit out there. The USGS folks are looking for places to put their test wells. I think they said 3. They were looking for something upgradient and 2 further down, although it's a little hard to do on that site. But so that is something we did get selected for, and they'll be moving ahead with that work, which is just going to be giving us information about the groundwater flow out there. It's not any kind of design of a PRB or anything like that. It's just whether or not the groundwater makes it feasible. I know, is your light going on all the
Yeah,
time?
it's not, his thing is,
Got a bum mic.
yeah, it's going
Okay.
on.
All right. And I think that's it, unless anybody else has got anything else you want to bring up. Oh, Mike, welcome.
Just to let you know, the town of Falmouth.
For the record, and our secretary is
Michael Talbot.
Michael Talbot from the Mashpee Environmental Coalition,
Also the chair of the Environmental Oversight Committee.
Town Oversight.
The town will assume responsibility for maintaining grinder pumps. It did pass town meeting.
They will, good for them.
If they were claiming that Falmouth was the only town that wasn't willing to do that in the Commonwealth.
And we'll maintain them, but who will pay for them?
Well, the town's already buying them for them.
Oh, okay, so they're gonna pay and pay for maintenance, okay.
Well, okay, with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second motion.
Okay, anything else from anybody? Everything going great, Rick? Can you tell me where to get some oysters this weekend? I'll talk to you after the meeting. All right. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
All right.
Yes.
Aye. Okay.